Hi folks, welcome to my 8-Bit Retro Journal. Today I'm going to be doing a video comparing graphical user interfaces from their introduction back in 1984. The Apple Macintosh was sort of the first computer that introduced graphical user interfaces to the masses, and that was followed in 1985 by the Atari ST and the Amiga. Now there were plenty of other graphical user interfaces, but the reason I'm looking at these computers is because there was also a generational shift in computers. It was the era of 16-bit computing when these machines had more powerful processors that were based on a 32-bit architecture, the Motorola 68000 architecture. There were other architectures. There was the Archimedes that came out a few years after that, I think in 1987, based on the ARM processor. But those were, it was really a generational shift. And along with those computers came a new way of sort of using computers, using these graphical environments. I'm also going to throw in my favorite computer, the QL, which came out, it was the first of the 16-bit generation to come out a couple weeks before the Macintosh. It didn't right away have a graphical interface, but a year later, around the same time the Amiga and the Atari came out, you got a ROM, well, it was a graphical interface that was ROM-based that you could put on your QL. So I want to add that to the mix. And what I want to do is compare them to see, who started out the best, and who won those first couple of years of graphical interfaces. I'm not going to include Microsoft Windows because, in my opinion, the first iteration, which was Windows 1, which came out at the end of 1985, was really not a good graphical environment. Obviously, it dominates the world now in 2022, but back then it was really just a glorified command shell, because it really didn't present icons for files, which were your objects. Plus, there were plenty of other graphical interfaces. Even the Commodore 64 had a graphical interface called GEOS, and although that was a remarkable feat of engineering, it did require additional hardware. You had to have a disk drive for it to run, and 64K of memory really limited you what you could do with it. Although, again, I've seen videos of that. It did really a nice job. And again, there were plenty of other visual environments that I wouldn't even call graphical interfaces for PCs, for TRS-80 machines. There was obviously the one interface that I am going to review as GEM, but I'm going to review it on the Atari, even though there was a PC version of GEM as well. They got immediately sued by Apple and then had to change their interface, and it wasn't so good after they changed it. I think the Atari version kind of keeps that original idea of the GEM interface, and so it has some really cool elements. So those are the four machines I'm going to do a comparison on, and I'm going to compare them on four criteria: likability, how nice did it look? Usability, one of the more important aspects is how usable was the graphical interface with respect to using your computer. Integration, how well was it integrated with the computer, or specifically the actual, what we consider the operating system, or what we did consider the operating system back in the day. And then implementation, how well was it implemented? And that's both speed and memory, etc. So those are the four areas that I'm going to compare these to, and then at the end I will try to give the best ranking to see who won that first round of graphical interface that sort of changed the way that we look at computers today, because today it's ubiquitous with any computer that you can't imagine not having a user interface based on icons and a mouse to manipulate your information on your computer. So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to start with likability. I'm actually going to do this on emulators only this time. Even though I like using real machines, I don't own an Atari ST. I don't have a classic Mac from 1984, and I don't actually, my Amiga 600 can't actually run, I don't have Kickstart 1.3. So I'm going to do everything in a graphical environment. I think that's sort of the better approach to it. So so let's do that. So here's the setup. These are the 4 emulators I'm going to be looking at. So this is the Macintosh running in Mini VMac. This is running, I believe, a Mac Plus ROM. And the operating system that's running is System 1.1 in 1984. So again, the timeline that I want to be looking at these interfaces. For the QL, I'm running it in QL2K, which is the latest version of QLA that includes sound. I'm running ICE, and on the Mac, the resolution is just 512 by, I don't know what, it was a 312 or something like that. Here it's, the QL is 512 by 256, which is not really a realistic screen resolution, but I mean, it's what the QL screen resolution is, but in terms of monitor resolution, I could do this, which is more realistic and kind of matches the Mac, but then you get all these artifacts. Of course, I could go big. So I'm going to keep it at this, even though it's on a real monitor, it would be stretched more, but it would not have the artifacts. So on the Amiga, I went with 512, and then I think it's 360 is the length of it, and it's running Workbench 1.1. And then for the Atari, I struggled with the screen resolution. Under here, you can actually do a 1-to-1, but then it does this, which is not really the way it looks on a monitor. Every video I've ever seen of an Amiga running in high res looks like sort of a stretched, kind of, well, squashed, I guess, look. So I want to use that for my resolution. If I went with the low res, it would actually give me 1/4 of this. So I think that will also not be that good. So I wanted to have them all kind of look equal. So the Atari looks a little bigger, but such is the case. All right, so let's move on. All right, likability. In first place, I'm going to give that to the Macintosh, because the folks in Apple really spent a lot of time designing this, considered one of the first user interfaces to the general public. They hired professional designers that came up with both the icons and all the widgets, even the pointer, as well as choosing a proper font, which I think is Chicago. And so, yeah, they spent a really large amount of time thinking about, what user interface should look like. And it actually held out for a long time, and I'll show you an example of this. So this is another emulator, Basilisk. And here it's running version System 7.55, which came out in 1995, so 13 years after the original system. But if you, and you can see it's integrated colors. There's 256 colors, so you start having, and again, I actually add colors, but if I got rid of the color, it still has sort of a nice blue to it. But more importantly, if I shut this down and restart this, but give it a monochrome look, what's really interesting is that the black and white Macintosh interface still persisted 15 years after it came out. So you can see looks the same. So that shows you the longevity of it. They didn't have to go and redesign it because they did a nice job designing it first. So I'm going to give the Macintosh 10 out of 10 for likability. In second place, I'm actually going to put the QL in second place. And the reason why is it has a very similar look to the Mac. Now, the default look is not black and white. It's actually green. But you can change the desktop color, which I did here. So unlike the Mac, this has this extra functionality, and I can. So this is kind of what it comes with, and it looks better on my monitor than it does on this screen that I'm recording. But if I say no and give it 215, yeah, that's kind of a nice color, and it has the same color palette as a high resolution Atari ST. Yeah, I'm happy with it, and I'm going to go here so you can see now that that's pretty pleasant. But I think, so it's not the desktop color that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the icons and the fact that it's black on white screen, and I think that's important. And if you look at the icons, especially these, and you can see them better if I grow the screen here. Yeah, they have sort of a nice 3D look to them, and they have a bunch. It's not 20, but there's under 20, or maybe there's about 20 icons that exist for the QL that allows you to show different icons as you're navigating the environment. And so the font, I'm not sure how I feel about the font, especially since they kind of made it all uppercase. You can see on the Macintosh, even for their menus, they're not all uppercase. So that's not the greatest choice. But I think in many ways, they perhaps got lucky with ICE. But yeah, it looks pretty good. So I'm going to give ICE second place at 9 out of 10. A close third is going to be the Amiga. And the reason I didn't put the Amiga ahead of the QL is because of this strange color palette of blue and orange and white. Now I know most Amiga users are going to scream saying, this is the best color because that's what I grew up with, but I'm not talking as much about nostalgia as I am about what would the general public like. And I think this was not a great choice. And in fact, Workbench 2.0 went away with this, and they kind of went more with soft grays and blue with a black on white background. So I think this was just kind of an odd choice. And so it's a color background. It's a color combo that I would give it third place at a close 8.5 out of 10. I do like the font. I think the font's much better than the QLs, and it comes more close to the Mac, even though the Mac still has the best font. And then in fourth place, I'm going to put the Atari ST. It has same color palette as the QL, but it has a squish screen, which is just hard to see. The font is really odd as well. And if you look at it, it just kind of reminds you of, even the icons, they're all squished. It reminds you of just sort of DOS, the old MS-DOS. And if you look at, even this stuff, and yeah. So I'm going to give it fourth place, 7.5 out of 10. Okay. So after one round of comparisons, we have the Mac leading at 10 points, the QL in second place, 9 out of 10, the Amiga a close third at 8.5, and then the Atari rounding it up at 7.5. All right, for usability, I'm going to give the Amiga top billing at 10 out of 10 points. And the reason why is because its interface was designed as a modern one would be. And so one of the things it has is the command shell. And in fact, not only does it have a command shell, but because of its multitasking operating system, you can have two command shells running, doing things independently of each other. And you can even, I like the fact even that you can kind of set aside the desktop to get to a full screen of a program. So yeah, I think usability wise, the Amiga really, thought this through and came up with a really nice design. So 10 out of 10 points to the Amiga. Good job, Commodore, or the Amiga team, I guess. Maybe we don't give credit to Commodore as much in the early days. In second place, I'm actually going to, again, put the Mac in second place. I know it doesn't have a command shell. I actually created a command shell for it in the early 90s. It was not well received. The command shell was actually pretty good, similar to the Amigas. But, Mac folks really didn't want a command shell. They were used to using their computer without it. And so give Mac folks credit that they actually thought about, hey, can we create an interface where we don't need a command shell? I personally prefer a command shell, but I think they did it for the general public. They did a really good job of that. So I'm going to give the, for usability, I'm going to give the Mac 8.5 out of 10. In third place, a close third, I'm going to put the Atari, because like the Macintosh, it had the ability to have a command shell. So, but it wasn't as, we'll talk about that in integration. But also like the Macintosh, oops, I think it's exit. It sort of straddled the line between the Amiga and the Macintosh. It wasn't as good as the Mac, but it did offer some functionality. And because of the clunkiness of having to sort of almost quit the interface to get to the command shell, I'm going to give it 7.5 out of 10. And then in last place, unfortunate for the QL, but not surprising, the QL was basically a file manager, a graphical file manager, or file explorer, I guess, that sat on top of the operating system. It was a separate product that you had to basically plug into the ROM port. And so I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 points because It's useful to start programs up, as you saw me start up Color Bass as a program. I can also start up Hello, and you'll see that once I do, it'll actually quit ICE and run it. Now I'm in the command shell. I can do, commands separate of ICE, and then I can come back to ICE. So, yeah, I mean, useful, but certainly missing a lot of features that would be handy to have in a graphical environment. And it certainly, it sticks these two apps, the calculator and the date book, on there, but they don't really do much, to be honest. This is just a calendar. There's nothing you can do with it other than show dates. Literally does nothing else. And then the calculator, now they did have a mouse version of ICE that allowed you to use a mouse, and the calculator would have been useful for that, but with the keyboard version, not so good. And then, of course, you could do things like rename and stuff. So it was really a point and select system, but no really draggable. If you look at even the here, you could actually come up with configuration, but there were certainly opportunities to really dive deeper into this. So yeah, the QL is going to be in 4th place here. It's literally just a file manager, and I know Choice does add a windowing manager, but so after round 2, we have the Amiga in 1st place at 18.5, and the Macintosh tied with it at 18.5, and then the Atari is in 3rd place at 15, and the QL actually is tied with it at 15. All right, for integration, I'm going to give the Macintosh top billing again. This time I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. And the reason why is, even though, it was a well thought out interface and really fully integrates the file system into the Mac and the whole experience, I still think had they added a command shell from the start, it would have been a perfect interface, just like, nowadays we expect that. But I will say, and I'll demonstrate this by opening up Basilisk again in color. One of the things they thought out really well was how the files, the objects, the data in your system would actually be stored. And so if you look at Resource Editor and open up a resource, not just open up Resource Editor, you'll see that there was 2 forks. There was a data fork that contained the information, and there's a resource fork that contained icons, graphics, code, and so menus. And so it was really well thought out as a system in terms of integration. It's just that they kind of missed the boat on the fact that should have added command shell. 2nd place, a close second, is the Amiga. It's going to get 8.5 out of 10. And the reason I'm not putting it ahead of the Mac or tying it is because I don't like the fact that icons are not representative of all files on the system. So you have to create these info files, and for Workbench 1.0, you really didn't have a way to show hidden icons. I know in Workbench 2.0 they changed it, but here the icons you saw were the ones that you had to sort of program in by creating info files, but there were a lot of files that you didn't see. So that's one strike against it, and so maybe I'll take half a point less than the Mac, but the other half a point goes in the fact that, unlike the Mac, on the Mac, many applications actually use its windowing environment, and I feel like I haven't seen that many on Amiga. I feel like it generally takes up the whole screen. I know a lot of them are games, but even games on the Mac would run in a window on the Mac versus taking up the whole screen. So I feel like the Amiga way was kind of like, get rid of this and run the program, then bring it back. In 3rd place, I'm going to put the Atari, because, like the both the Amiga and the Mac, it sort of straddles both of them, but it's just not as good. I might have tied it with the Amiga, but I think the thing that bothers me here is that you literally are, you're, as far as integration goes, you're literally leaving. It's almost like there is no graphical interface when you leave. Very similar to the QL, but again, a lot of other things are well integrated. I think you do get an icon for every file, so I like that. I'm going to give it 7 out of 10 points, mainly because I feel like the fact that you have to leave the interface to use the command shell, which is kind of a positive on the Amiga, they really didn't integrate that part well. And then the final one is the QL. And again, the QL is, unfortunately, it's just a file manager. And the integration is pretty weak. Most of the time, you actually would leave the environment and then you're back. And at this point, the ICE only takes up about a K of memory because it's just waiting for you to call it again. But there's really nothing else. The one nice thing here is that it does allow you to get some system information. So if you have another job running that you ran outside of ICE, this will see it because it's just asking the operating system. But certainly you can redefine some of these devices. So if you have a Winchester drive, for instance, you can change devices. So I can keep these, but I can say, you know what, I have a Winchester drive, and so now if I have a hard drive attached to it, I can get up to 8 devices here. So that part's nice. But other than that, I just feel like it's too simple. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 points for integration. So it didn't quite meet the goal of a graphical interface. And so after 3 rounds, likability, usability, and integration, we currently have the Macintosh in first place, 28 points. The Amiga close behind at 27 out of 30 points. The Atari is in third place now at 22 out of 30 points. And the QL is trailing behind at 21 out of 30 points. All right, so for implementation, I'm going to give the QL top billing here and give it 10 out of 10 points. And the reason why is this interface basically lives in 16K of memory. It's got a ton of icons, it's got lots of functionality, and only takes up 16K of ROM and very little RAM when it's running. So that's an amazing feat of engineering if you think about it. Can't beat that. And it's fast, it's low overhead. If all interfaces could have been like that in the 80s, I think we'd be much happier. In second place, I'm going to put the Atari ST, mainly because, like the QL, it has a ROM-based interface. Now, the first few deliveries of the Atari ST did require folks to load it in on floppy, but that wasn't sustainable because it took up most of the memory, and people could come back and then get a ROM EPROM on their board to actually do ROM-based. So I'm going to count this as a ROM-based system. Now, the reason I'm giving it 9 out of 10 instead of a 10 out of 10 like the QL is because it's operating system, even though it's more functional, it's not that much more functional that it should be taking up 200K, which is almost, I don't know, not quite, it's more than 10 times, like 12 or 13 times the amount of space that the QL's ICE uses, so it's not as efficient, so I'm going to deduct a point out of it, but it's still nice and fast to boot up, so kudos to the Atari for that. In third place, I'm going to put the Mac in third place, and the reason is that, floppy disks you had to load, took some time, and so I'm going to give the Macintosh a 7.5 out of 10 for that. And if you had to use a second floppy, then you did a lot of disk switching, and that was not fun. I've used a 128 before, and it was a little painful to get things to run. You had to really wait to do that, so it relied a lot on the floppy disk. And then in fourth place, I'm going to put the Amiga 1000, basically, right? It's the 1985 Amiga, because you had to do double floppy loads. You had to load the ROM before kickstart ROM because they decided to put it on a disk before you loaded the workbench. So it was painful. And I've even used, a modern Amiga 600 with only a floppy, and just doing anything required so much, disk swapping. And luckily I had a megabyte of memory because that allowed me to at least put some stuff in RAM disk, but still painful. So I'm going to give the Amiga a 6.5 out of 10 here. So that gives us a final tally with regard to scores. The Macintosh is going to be number 1 here, 35.5 points. The Amiga is going to come in second at 33.5 points, so a couple of points behind the Mac. The Atari and the QL are actually going to be tied at 31 points. So kudos to the QL for actually holding its own. Again, if you look at both of these interfaces, the Atari and the QL, they really do look like, I mean, unfortunately with the Atari, this part right here, it looks like it's just leaving the operating system, which to me is just no different than what the QL is doing with regard to exiting the operating system, right? And so I know that with the Atari, it's a little different because it's a bit more integrated. So, but still, I feel like they could have done a better job with that. I'm comfortable having the get this back. I'm comfortable having the Macintosh first because I think the folks at Apple really spent a lot of energy designing this interface. But the Amiga also got some things right that the Macintosh didn't. So those are my rankings. Are we surprised that the Macintosh came out ahead? Probably not. I mean, the Macintosh is still around today. It led, in my opinion, the graphical user interface platform for a long time. Not sure if I like the current state of the Macintosh environment. I think Windows has done a decent job, and of course there's other players, and especially in the Linux market. But in the original 1984-85 timeline, I think Apple really spent a lot of effort to try to get it right, and they did a good job. So I'm going to end there. I'm interested to hear your comments on what you think would be a fair rating, keeping in mind, it's not just about nostalgia, like, I grew up with the Amiga, that blue and orange look was perfect. But, what do you think the general public would have thought? That's kind of how I was trying to view it. That's why I went with the Macintosh, because, as I said, they really spent a lot of effort and invested in researching that. And so that's why I think it didn't change for a long time. Okay, I'm going to end here. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.